Good morning. While we're waiting on our few remaining board members to trickle in, believe it or not, Savannah's train has caught them. I think we've all lived that. So what we'll do is we're not going to call the meeting to order, but we're going to go ahead and start with the staff report. And then once we reach a quorum, we will call the meeting to order. With that, Leah, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. So in the past, we have brought to you status reports in numerical form, giving you the list of audits that we're doing, how many hours we've been doing it, and then just providing informational items. So if you look after the agenda on the back of the page, you'll see where we have Internal Audit Department status update. This is the new format in which we're going to present this information to you. It's multi-tiered in how of the information that we provide. First and foremost, we're highlighting what we've completed and what's in progress. That way you can monitor kind of what was in that status report with the numerical components of it, but we're showcasing it more in a descriptive narrative at this point. So under the completed, as you can see what we've already brought to you, those are the ones that you have already seen, we've presented, you have approved, and the board has approved as well. The in progress are the ones that we are currently working on at this point, and that's the audit of the graduation rate, audit of purchasing processes, and the audit of concession and school store processes. On the next page, you're going to see the summary of audits update. So as part of the strategic plan, internal audit has always have played a role in presenting to the board the list of reviews, audits that have occurred in the district, and the status of management's actions within those reports. But we are definitely going to be more distinctive in the in one of the strategies of the strategic plan. So what we wanted to bring to you, the audit committee, is what we will be looking at, and it will also help us monitor what we need to do for the strategic plan. So right now, as you can see under the summary of audits, we've waited till April to present this to you because the strategic plan should be coming to the board for approval in March, and we did not want to start this process until the board has finalized their approval of this plan. But what we're going to bring to you is the number of closed recommendations based on management's response. So that SMART map that you typically see at the end of each audit report, where we show the recommendation, management gives those actions, and then there's a date beside it. Okay, so what we do is we go back as part of our follow-up process that's required for our auditing standards, is we go and we have those conversations with management, sometimes needing evidence to support those actions that have occurred. If we can determine that those actions that have occurred were completed, then we'll mark it as completed on the summary of audits that we bring to the board, as well as you, and you'll see that in March as well. They will, you will see it as marked completed. So then we're going to start showing you the monthly totals as well as the total year to date. We will also highlight the total number percentage of management's actions that are still open. So we can monitor that as well. We'll provide the total number and percentage of management actions that's still outstanding. What does that mean? They gave us a particular date, but didn't give us a change of completion date, so it's still remaining open. But we are also going to highlight when management has requested a date of completion change. Okay? Does anybody have any questions of that new area that we're providing?
I'm going to back up. We're going to do a couple of administrative things now that we've achieved it for them. Yes. I'm going to quickly call the meeting to order.
Mike George.
We're going to call the meeting to order and ask for a hasty approval of the agenda. It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda for the February 22nd, 2024 Audit Committee meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Very quickly, has anyone had a chance to review the minutes? From the previous meeting, are there any adjustments or additions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes with any necessary minor corrections.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the January 25th, 2024 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. With those actions complete, we will return to your item of the Audit Committee Information Matters.
Okay.
Good
Yes.
morning.
Good morning.
And thank you. Pardon me for my tardiness.
It's the train.
Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. It's just a simple question because I realized in being late, you were talking about the schedule of of work, and there used to be a table. Is that, are we not doing that table anymore?
We will bring that table back to you at the end of the year so you can see it conclusively. And eventually, too, we're going to add like financial data to it, too, so you see the cost of an audit that occurred based on the person who's conducting. It's going to be more extensive at one point, but we will bring that to you at our end of the year where we wrap up all the audits that we've done, where we do the benchmark report and all that kind of stuff. We are bringing it back to you at the end of the year so you can see it all conclusive.
But we're not using it as a calendar. Like, I kind of used it as a mind map. Like,
Okay.
when we get it, I know that these are the things that we're probably going to talk about. So we're only using it as a summary report and not as a calendar for the year. Is that what we're doing?
Correct. And if you can see after the summary of audits, we're kind of highlighting that for you down below that for the remaining of the plan status. So that way you can see when it's scheduled to report out. Will that assist you with what your needs for that previous one? Or did you prefer to see the projected to the actual? Because we can still add that back in here.
It probably will.
Okay.
If I need something else, I'll let you know. For now, I think I'll be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Leah, I think this is a great format. I think it's going to show us the information better, so I appreciate it. And I look forward to you and Dr. Watts integrating your function into the strategic plan, and I understand everything you're saying about getting the strategic plan approved and then integrating. So
Before we can highlight that stuff, yes. So yeah, and the other remaining piece of the audit plan status, this is where we're showcasing where we are in the audit plan that you all approved. And so with that, the New Hampstead High School, K-8 school, is scheduled to be completed after the purchasing process. I don't know how extensive that audit is. I would assume it's pretty extensive, so I do not want to give that there's only going to be a few days here, a few days there, because we're just in the preliminary stages. Artificial services, that was part of what we had with the East Blast auditor that we had. As you know, we do not have that one at this point, so it's on hold due to staffing, but it can be reevaluated at a later time. The school nutrition reviews will be brought to you next audit committee, as well as the nurse reviews will be brought to you in March. The plan is the speech language pathologist will be brought to you in June, and the transportation inventory parts in April, whereas the other ones, depending on the conclusion of those other parts, could be a potential carryover into the next audit plan if it's determined and approved that way. What we also highlighted is our training. Like before, we had requested an increase of training in money from you all to seek that approval. And then also to highlight, what we've done so you can see it ongoing. We've added this component of the professional development so you can see which individual is conducting what type of professional development. That way, if you have a question of, where we're getting our training as well, you can ask us. So the other informational items I want to bring to you is that the internal audit position was closed on February 16th. I was happy to say we had 16 applications, and out of those, we're going to interview 6. So we're really excited about that. As for the senior internal auditor position, that one is open until March 8th. That one is a little more extensive in their knowledge of auditing, and most auditors can work remote now. So, but our auditing industry is a lot like the teaching industry. We have a lot of auditors exiting and not a lot of accountants entering, or, business-minded people, business operational people entering into the auditing world as well. So we are in that group of trying to find people. But we are not giving up on that. So does anybody have any questions?
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is our audit of athletic game tickets. I am going to. And Ms. King, this is your first appearance before the committee, is it not?
Yes.
So please introduce yourself
I will. Good morning. I'm Nia King. I'm the intern here at the Internal Audit Department. Over the last year, I completed the audit of athletic game tickets and reconciliation process.
Welcome.
Thank you. The objectives of this audit was to review game ticket reconciliation procedures and test for compliance with procedures. It also was to review vendor agreement of third-party e-ticket collection and procedures for compliance, as well as review game ticket reconciliation for accuracy and reporting revenue collection. The summary of the audit was we performed an audit of the district's athletic game ticket reconciliation process to review the compliance of procedures and to any vendor agreement. We identified areas of improvement needed for the following: agreement with vendor and reconciliation procedures. The audit period included July 1st, 2022 to June 23rd, 2023. The scope of this audit was, our audit included reviewing revenue receipts for game ticket sales, vendor agreements, and game ticket sales reconciliation process procedures. We selected a judgmental sample of 30 district athletic games, which included the sports of football, basketball, soccer, and volleyball, to determine the compliance with procedures. The background of this audit was prior to March 2020. The reconciliation process of athletic game ticket sales was conducted manually using road ticket process that was cash only. To adhere to the COVID-19 protocols and to ensure a reduction in the physical exchange of monies, the district moved to cashless game ticket sales process.
Thank you.
Our first observation was the reconciliation procedures, and we issued this as a high rating. Game ticket reconciliation procedures do not exist for the collection process after March 2020. Attempts are made to document the money recipiated
You're doing great.
from the vendor. However, a formal reconciliation does not occur to ensure the tickets sold and validated at the events are paid to the district. The district's athletic department receives the checks from the vendor GoFan. A report supporting the checks from the GoFan identifies the game title, total tickets sold, and the total of tickets redeemed at the event. GoFan charges $1 each for each ticket redeemed. The athletics department documents the amount of revenue reported from GoFan in an internal report of all games selling tickets. The checks are then deposited into the bank by the athletic department. Munis transaction ledger reflects the school's name but not the date of the game. No other actions are taken by the athletic departments or finance department to reconcile the revenue of tickets sold. We conducted a reconciliation of revenue provided from GoFan and the information documented from the athletics department. We selected, again, a judgmental sample of 30 games in which we found discrepancies in 3 of the games, where the amount received was not the amount that should have been documented. In review of the revenue reported in Munis, we could not find a direct correlation to reported revenue from the provided reports to the document revenue in Munis. Not conducting a reconciliation of found from a vendor puts the district at risk of loss of revenues. Therefore, the recommended following: the Division of the Finance develop procedures for the reconciliation process, athletic game revenue to game tickets sold. Again, the action for athletics, is to maintain a schedule of athletic events by date, school, sport, and event number, as well as cost reference and track payment receipts from GoFan and provide details to finance. Finance actions include all checks will be mailed from the vendor to finance, as well as finance will notify athletics of check receipt, provided copies thereof. Checks will be entered into Munis detailing school, sport, and event number provided by athletics and provide athletics with monthly reports of receipts.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have another one.
Oh, well, we might talk about this one first.
Go ahead.
So what, I'll turn this over to the people you audited. How long is our contract with GoFan?
So you want to talk about the contract piece since it's... So with GoFan, we began to use them, as she said, during COVID. And I think the next one actually speaks to the contract and that they're going through that process. So I think her next finding addresses the contract piece for GoFan. I don't know if you want to wait until she shares
We can wait?
that.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for the first finding? the first observation.
So when was the last time, Leah, maybe this is for you, when was the last time an audit was done for ticket sales?
I'm trying to go back in my memory bank. It was probably about 10 years ago, but that process was the old ticket,
Yeah.
process when cash was transferred and stuff like that. So it was about 10 years ago when we looked at the previous game ticket sale process.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And this is also for Leah. Great job. I know we are a big, scary group up here, and you did really, really well. So I'm very proud of you for that. My question is just kind of piggybacking on his. I just kind of had a light bulb moment. When we go over board policies, we always have a place where it says last reviewed at this time. How difficult would it be to, in these audit reports, have last audit date for this process?
Well,
listed?
we debated that actually, but because the process is so different now, there wasn't really a relationship to the style of how they reconcile. But I can see that moving forward, because typically we do. I'm trying to think of some ones that I recently brought to you where we discussed that like the student discipline one that I brought to you, we highlighted the 2 or 3 other audits that we looked at as to what management has done, but we can easily add that back in.
I
if
think
that's
that would be
something.
helpful. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be in the narrative, but like in the header that says, we looked at this at this time. Not understanding that the audit exercise will be different, but from a leadership point of view, when is the last time we looked at this? We looked at this in this year. I think that would be,
We can easily start putting that in the background.
okay, thank you.
One other question. What is the total dollar amount of ticket sales? Like how big is this?
I can't specifically.
And you can phone a friend over there in finance.
It actually depends on the athletic event, how big the ticket sales.
I mean in total for the annual. Like what's our annual?
That I'm going to defer. I'm going to phone a friend in finance.
We have to get the information back to you.
Okay, but I mean it's $100,000, $10,000. I mean,
It's probably, I'm assuming around $200,000 or $300,000.
Okay.
Around about.
yeah, just
Yeah,
a
so
scale
this-
of the issue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Observation 2, which included our vendor agreement, we issued that rating as high as well. The district does not have a vendor agreement with the vendor that is providing services to the district. They are out of compliance with the board policy DGE purchasing. We concluded that purchasing department has established procedures for vendors that do not require an RFP process, but need a memorandum of understanding to ensure our procurement policies and procedures are adhered to by both the district and the vendor. In Board Policy DGE, the policy states, the district recognizes a number of special situations enumerated below in which district employees may depart from the competitive methods listed above, so long as they adhere to the following procedure. Submit a written request approved by a school department supervisor to the purchasing department along with supporting documentation requested by the purchasing department. The purchasing department will review the request to determine if it is appropriate for the purchase to the department from one of the competitive methods set forth above under district policies in any applicable state or federal law or regulation. Any request for an exception which exceeds $25,000 will be forwarded to the Chief Financial Officer for approval. Upon approval, the Director of Purchasing. The Athletics Department did not follow district policy. Therefore, we are recommending the following to ensure compliance with the board policy. Our recommendation for the Athletics Department is to initiate a signed contract with the vendor. And that was all the recommendations we have. And for, again, both observations were a high rating.
Are there any questions?
I do. So I'm clear. This was not a competitive, there was no competitive bid or anything when it came to,
Not for this process. This was kind of more of a knee-jerk type reaction during the middle of COVID.
I
And we were
understand.
just trying to find a solution to get away from accepting cash out of game.
I understand.
This was a process that was used by some other districts, and we just really, it was just something that we hastily just
So, but
approved.
going forward, because I know that there are a lot of these companies out there that provide ticketing services, and some charge X, some charge Y, and.
We're in the process now of going through that
Perfect.
process
Okay.
for the upcoming
Good.
contract.
Good,
Yes,
good,
sir.
good. So, and also, all right, I just need to go back and look at, from the board standpoint, look at our policy and make sure our policy is up to date on this. Because things are changing. Things are changing. Okay.
Yes.
Right. That's a great report, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Very good job.
Very well done, thank you. Come on, we're not gonna be as nice to you.
We need approval of that one, though.
Oh, I do would take a motion to approve that excellent report.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the report.
Geez, second.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the report on the audit of athletic game ticket sales. All in favor? Report is adopted.
All right. So the next item is the business process school reviews. So I'm going to give a little detail because I know we have some new committee members, so I can explain this process. So business reviews are more of just simplified compliance monitoring activity that we conduct for the district, looking at various controls within the school sites on a continuous basis. We do this yearly. It's contingent on if there's a new principal at the school, not necessarily new in the stance of new to principalship, but new to the school. And then after the 4th year of them being at the school, we follow up just to make sure if those controls are still in place. So last year, we reviewed 20 schools, of which 8 are follow-ups. So what constitutes a follow-up is that if any of the areas, as you can see on the right-hand side, purchasing student activity funds, purchase cards, or student data, exceeds an error rate of 20% or more, we return to look at that particular area. We do not go back for the whole area. For the whole review, just that particular area, to give the principal support and knowing that any changes that they had made in that process in order to reduce the risk of those errors, whether those controls are working or not. So this year we looked at purchasing accounts payable, student activity funds, purchase cards, and student data. So for purchasing and accounts payable, as you know, the shift to Munis kind of simplified this process, and you can definitely see that occurring extensively in the results of the conclusively across all of the schools. We only had 3 schools that had needs improvement that were requiring for follow-ups. Everybody else was in line with a few errors here and there. So what we look at with purchasing is we look to make sure that, one, you've uploaded the information of the supporting documentation within the Munis ledger, Munis program, as well as ensuring that everything was signed and dated as required by the purchasing handbook. And we also look to see if it was entered within 72 hours, as well as to make sure that you didn't order the stuff prior to the purchase order. We also look at special check requests, and that's the reimbursement process that the district allows for staff to do. So we make sure that they follow those procedures as well. Any questions in the purchasing realm? Okay. Student activity funds, that's improved. We have 2 schools in that, just to explain, I know some people say, well, what's happening at these 2 schools? The key one, the 2, basically, there's new secretaries that are learning new processes, and so student activity funds can be very extensive in nature. So until they get that pattern of behavior, we really expect to see improvements in those 2 schools when we come back. But everybody else tends to be lower in nature of those error rates, so we're pretty confident that they are following controls. And just to give you feedback, so you often hear the student activity funds from the external auditors, but also the finance team also looks at student activity funds as well. So student activity funds have looser controls than purchasing, but we always have either two sets of auditors or the finance team continuously looking at these things. All right, in the area of purchase cards, this is an area that needs improvement. One of the things that we captured is this process, I think, is still new for some of our secretaries. I think are we in the second or third year of the implementation of the Munis process for the third year? So when we looked at this was last year's data, so it was really the second year. And so the process has changed a little bit. Before, you would have a purchase card for each account line that was in your budget based on what you were using it for, if the principal determined to do that. And what we have done now is you only have one card, and then you can highlight which account number you want to apply that to. Okay, so it helps in the error of theft rate, that's much improved. There's less cards, but the process now requires them not to dump it into one account line. And I think most of the errors that you see here is that they're all moving it into the supply account. Well, based on the budget book's description of the account line code requirement, isn't always supplies based on the items that are purchased on the receipt. So a lot of times we find those errors, and that is what you're seeing here in these percentage rates. So I think it's more of a practice the new practice not being implemented as strong as it could. So we're hoping to see improvements next year.
Quick question, do we have a limit on the purchase card, or again, just to the scale of this system?
Would you like to answer that one?
For most cars, it depends on the level. At the most, the limit would be $5,000 purchases per month. And some of the schools are probably a little bit less. I believe they're like $2,500 per month that they can use on the purchasing card.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, all right, go ahead.
All right, so the last area is student data. Student data, we've changed the way we've looked at it a little bit. In the past, we just looked at whether the coding matched what was in the system, as well as did the attendance was documented correctly of what was in the system, to support what the student information systems look at. But what we started noticing when the code of conduct changed, with that audit that we conducted, we recommended that matrix format. The district accepted that, and they changed that into a more two-column choices for principals to choose from, where here's the incident, here's the consequence. It's more complex in nature based on whether it's an elementary level or high school, based on the incident and so forth. So it's a little more extensive. So what we decided to do is add more questions to make sure they are following this new code of conduct. So what we test now is to make sure that the description of the incident is supported by the incident code. Okay, because there are times where we found the description from the teacher that was written on the report didn't necessarily support the definition of the code that was entered into the system. So that is a change that we started looking at to make sure that because the student information system the team do not look at that form. They don't have that. They just have the data points that they review to make sure the error rates are correct and we're reporting to the state correctly based on the data points that are provided to them. They don't necessarily see that form. So to support the data points that are going in, we thought to look a little more extensive. The other thing we're looking at too is part of the discipline referral form has a severity level, and in that severity level in the matrix dictates what kind of consequence that you could provide. So now we're looking at the severity level in connection to the consequence to make sure that it followed the code of conduct. So most of the errors that you see here are based on those two new questions that we added. Any questions?
Now is your time. Now is your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the report, and my comments are kind of overarching about one of the intensity of the consequences of inconsistencies. So student activity funds, I used to get all up in arms about that, but yeah, they're always messy, always going to be messy just because of the nature of how they're generated and how they're moved around. So I look for improvement, but I'm not excessively disturbed about what we see there. Mm-hmm. There are 4 facilities that had needs improvement in 2 categories. and I don't need to name them, but that is something worthy of note. I know those facilities are aware of it and probably looking at it, but I think whatever extra attention is needed for support would be helpful. One concern is that we have a special use location that has a high potential for generating revenue that is having some challenges with spending. And so there's some risk. To me, there's greater risk there because that facility is highly attractive for rental and other types of things that would be generating money. And so whatever support needs to be offered, we should look at because they're an asset. And we want to make sure that they function in the way that they need to be. The thing that's most concerning to me are the disciplinary records because they have far-reaching consequences for the young people. And I've gotten calls this year. I've had the experience myself where I've seen in a school something is on fire, something's happening with a young person, and the adults are trying to address it, whether it's two kids fighting and they're separating the kids or whatever is going on, they're triaging the situation and the paperwork has a delay and or doesn't ever get updated to really reflect what happened. So that has consequences when the dust settles and everyone's looking around at what child did what, who had responsibility, is this a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3 conduct violation? Those data need to be accurate. Because if it escalates to where it comes to the board, when we get that child's packet, we look at all that. We are flipping through the back and we're looking to see how many tardies, how many absences, what are their grades, what are all of the different disciplinary infractions, because we're looking for signs in that young person's experience that we need to offer assistance, that we need to offer a different facility, that we want to support whatever staff or judiciary recommendations are coming to us. So those data are really, really important because we're taking them as truth and we're taking them as a transcript of that child's life. And if they're not right, that's problematic. If they are underreporting what we're seeing, and I guess I'm saying this for Ms. Ball Oliver because you're the one who's working with the principals who are dealing with these fires every day. I know it's challenging and it's hard to have to wrap yourself around all those things. But if those things aren't right and we're under recognizing what's happening with a young person, then our actions might not be a right fit. If we are over-reporting, then we are labeling a child who's not going to escape a label because, and we already know that there are other issues that contribute to labeling like bias, but, you know, this child could be someone that just had migraines, but they're categorized as a behavioral issue, whereas if they just got treatment for their migraines, it would be, you know, taken care of. So the disciplinary referrals records are challenging to me because they follow the child throughout the district, and they don't, you know, I don't think there's another opportunity where we look at them and determine whether or not they're accurate. And if the parent is not looking at them, and I've had parents contact me and say, my child got, you know, a disciplinary report for this, but that's not really what happened. You know, I don't know what other time that we fix that. So I just wanted to bring that up for how we use this information.
I appreciate you providing that because the narrative that we're trying to start them to understand is exactly what you're saying, that this is more than just state reporting. This is a form that can be used not only coming to the board, but if there's guardianship issues or anything to that extent, these things can be pulled. And so we got to make sure that all the data points that are on this form is accurate as can be and represent the actions that really occur. Now, in that process, they cannot change what the teacher initially wrote up, but the administration can go back and write, you know, can see that something else has happened. And what we discovered is a lot of times they're not writing this additional narrative after the investigation. So the form still has what, as you say, the parent has, and like, this is not how it happened. So we're encouraging to use the supplemental form, because there is a supplemental discipline referral form, that once that investigation's completed and they see that the description of the incident is different, that's why the code changed or the consequence changed from the initial review, is that we see that this is the reason why. So you should see that supportive, hopefully that evolution will start occurring where you see that supportive investigation result by the administration of what actually happened compared to what was in that initial description by the teacher.
Also, I just want to add to your point, Dr. Hoskins Brown, that when we went to the matrix, I think that, and I think this was a couple of years ago based on that recommendation, I think additional training is needed because there used to be a training that actually those persons, typically it's the assistant principal, that is actually processing a lot of this, and the IS, sometimes working with them. There used to be a training that provided how you utilize the discipline form, and I think we need to do that again in alignment with the actual matrix, because there are a whole lot of shifts on that matrix, and some of our administrators are still finding that confusing. So I think there needs to be a greater training in terms of how those two work together to actually generate what is entered into the system. Thank you.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Who owns that? Does the academic side own that, or does the student support side own the training?
So the student support side is under the academic side, but we own it in conjunction with SIS, because that's where our information specialists reside, and that's where the actual data entry sometimes occurs depending on the school site. So it's a tag team. We actually used to do that training jointly, and we need to do that again, but use the new matrix because it is a bit different.
Did it just get off of our plate and we have the resources to do it, or do we need money for that?
So I think we did it internally and we have the resources. I think in the shift to this new rubric, because we kind of shifted to this new rubric as we were returning post-COVID. And so I think that there was some general training, but it was not deep enough. We did it the first year. We need to come back. We need to retrain. And we also need to identify where we see the trends and the patterns so that we can address where that gap is in understanding.
Okay, thank you.
I agree, and I certainly appreciate your passion about getting it right. To your point, and to everybody's point, this is the child, transcript, that's a great line, transcript of this child's life.
Oh,
Like,
I'm going to
we
use that,
can't-
by the way,
yeah, we
Hoskins
can't,
Brown, in my communication principles.
Yeah, we really, we can't, whether you miss high or you miss low, it's very,
It's
very
transcript.
concerning. So I think this emphasis on accurate reporting is very important. So how can the audit department help academic affairs with that? Is there data that they can give you, that we could give you to help you, or that Leah, not me, but Leah, could give you?
So I think using these data points as well as looking at maybe digging down into the specific numbers. So it always helps when you can share numbers with them, and then actually allowing an opportunity for them to generate questions. Some of the administrators have found that the rubric makes things a lot more confusing and hard to manage. That was developed. So that's some feedback and maybe some adjustments that we need to do, because it is a bit difficult for them sometimes to manage that. So I think that would help as well. We did have some principals provide feedback on the rubric, but I think we probably need to, now that they've used it, gain additional feedback and make the necessary adjustments. Because as you pointed out too, Dr. Hoskins Brown was saying, when you're in that moment dealing with it, and then you have to go back and look at that rubric and try to reconcile, but then also in that moment, and there's an addendum that comes in and that needs to be updated, but you can't change what the teacher does. So I think there's some things that we need to look at that would allow us to streamline our process for schools so that we know that it's more accurate what we're capturing. And so I think that needs to occur as well. So we'll need to talk about that and that whole rubric system.
And now the data that we're looking at was last year's data, but this year I already, in the beginning of the school year, we're attending principals meetings and pulling up a discipline referral form and walking through what we're auditing now, so they are well aware of why and what we're looking at as well. So in theory, and I think with connection to what Bernadette on their side of their training piece, hopefully we'll see some improvements, but we'll see.
So
I had a question, shifting gears a little bit though. Back to the purchase cards error rate, all right? So if you look at the executive summary, the table on page 1, I thought I heard you say that if it were greater than 20%, that's how you determined to go back and look a second time? And so, all right, I guess because some of those numbers I see on there are very concerning for me for an error rate on purchase cards. And if that's their second go-around, they're still higher than that.
Well, if you have on page 1 of that report, if you see an asterisk by the school, then yes, we've already been there once before for that particular area.
That's right. And for
Yeah.
it still, so when you were already there, so you mentioned the 2 new codes, if you will, that were part of the issues, right? But if you've already been there a second time, weren't those codes already addressed the first time?
Yes, they were.
Which means it's a continuing problem, I guess.
Yes, that is.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to clarify, because that's what's jumping out at me is these percentages still seem to be pretty high, even if already addressed.
And, also these percentages are also based on how much usage they had. So sometimes they may have only had, we look no more than 30 transactions, but they may have only had 15 transactions. So, the lower number of transactions, the higher the chance of the potential error rate as well. So, but it still goes along with the expectation that it's a simplified process, so there should be less errors.
Thank you.
So I was trying to avoid the P cards because it's such a challenging area. If you have a P card holder and you need them to be a P card holder, so we had a P card revolution at both of my jobs, and there were lots of people who had P cards. I used to have one. It was like across a division, anybody who had a grant or anybody who was in the branch that had extramural funding had a P card, and they shrunk that down to like singular P card holders. And so I don't have the ability to know this from the report, but for the sake of conversation, I want to bring up, is it that we have individuals who are functioning in the system as the P card holder who have overwhelm or poor training, but they have the greatest level of responsibility for procurement because they're the designated holder? Like, for example, in one of my units, there's one P card holder and there's like 9 of us. And I've got 4 grants myself. So any purchase that I ask her to handle, and then there's other people who have the same number of grants. So is it pressure and overwhelm, or is it, too many users, or too many users that are not taking the policies seriously?
So in response to those 2 options, option A, because they're not like a whole lot of users, you're not going to have that in the school. You're going to have administration, but you got all of those people. That could be one. There could be different scenarios here. That could be one. Leah discussed the change in how we actually code, so getting those secretaries to understand now how you go back and you look at that in Munis is different. The other could be, and I am not familiar with whether or not these are new persons here that may need additional training on when they are actually reconciling things. They may need additional training and support, or it may be that shift to the Munis system, they still are not familiar with it, and so that could be the cause. So I can think of, as a former principal, 3 things that may bubble up. You may have new bookkeeper handling this. It could be what you said in option A, I'm the holder of the P card, but I'm doing it for 25 people, and so it may be overuse and overwhelmed, or it could be that they need additional support and understanding how to do that in Munis because we have shifted procedures.
I think that's really helpful. When I was was a P card holder, no longer P card holder. I was mad and then glad that I was not a P card holder because it would take me a full day to reconcile just my expenditures. And I would have like less than 30, but I had to have 3 forms for each expenditure to document approvals, and then I had to put that together in a packet that had to go up for approval. If you're the purchaser for a large unit, We don't probably have this because that person's doing many, many other things, but they probably need planning time like teachers do. Like, they just need the time to do the reconciliation, because I made mistakes because I was throwing it together to meet the deadline, and then budget would send it back down to me. So any supports that we can give the folks who are doing that will probably see that reflected in reduced findings. If they have the time, if they have the training, and then they have the protected time to handle this data effectively, then maybe we'll see some improvement.
I would agree. They actually made me get a purchasing card when I finally came to central office. As a principal, I just told my staff, get over it, I'm not doing one. Because then it would fall on me to do everything. No.
And principals do have that choice.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head. I think the timing is important, having enough allocated time to do that, because you mentioned about doing a reconciliation with our staff. You're going to reconcile the expenditures, but we need you to also scan and upload receipts to match every expenditure that's on that card. So for some folks, that could take a good bit amount of time.
And if you are a site, and I'm just looking on this, that only has one person, that's the person that's also answering the phones, probably. That's the person that's dealing with the parents coming in the front door. That's the person that any teacher needs, anyone coming to the front office. I'm also the Chronos timekeeper. So I am all things to all people in that area, plus this. And so I may not have the time to actually spend on this in isolation.
This person also does the purchasing orders and the student activity funds
Everything.
as well. And you can see many of these are elementary schools, and those are the ones that typically have one.
And they typically have one person.
Thank you.
Easy problem solved. Yeah. All right, well, thank you, and thank you for this very detailed report. If there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the report or accept the report.
I'll move to adopt the report.
Been probably moved and seconded that we adopt the report of business process school reviews for 2022, 2023. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I would officially eat some crow. We are back in the Eli Whitney complex. I didn't think that was going to happen. So compliments to the construction department. And with that, our next meeting will be March 28th, right here at the Eli Whitney complex. We are adjourned?
AM.
AM, yes.
Yeah.
I was drinking coffee.